That house was very haunted, and there had been deaths, and they had related it to witchcraft. Portal opened in the room, and a voice came in. Now I had this little person who could apparently hear my thoughts. The ghost stole her pants. I got a job ghost hunting, fighting demons and catching ghosts. And he told me how he hunted these ghost roosters with the cat. You have to be prepared for all the types of crazy because it's a buffet.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Medium's Table. I'm your host, Michelle Gardner. This podcast is your personal invitation to join me at the intersection of the everyday and the extraordinary. Together, we'll explore the magic of mediumship, share spiritual stories, and connect with fellow mediums on this incredible journey. So grab a seat, pour yourself a cuppa, and come join us at the Medium's Table, where spirits gather and stories unfold. I'd like to welcome to the show psychic medium, paranormal investigator, ghost hunter, and I have to add in, sorry, Julie, cosmic butterfly. Julie, welcome to the show. It is so good to have you here. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
It's been a long time in the making, and we've known each other for a little while now. We've ran around in circles, you could say, literally in circles, development circles. And I've seen your wonderful, amazing gifts. You are very unique, and I'm going to say very out of this world. And I would love for you to share with us how you got to where you are today, because as what happens with most people I have on here, I actually don't know your full story. That's just how it rolls.
That is. I've been thinking about it myself. I'm like, how did all these things happen in ways that are kind of like life, you know? I actually feel like my story is a lot about self-defense and trying to gain understanding or control or insight into the things that were happening to me, as opposed to having a goal or pursuing becoming something, maybe becoming more who I am. I'm not sure. Like it wasn't intentional. I promise that. At first. So I grew up in a house that was built before the Revolutionary War and in Pennsylvania and not far outside of Philadelphia. So actually kind of in the Valley Forge area. And that house was very haunted.
Wow.
So the house is built out of stone, and it's typical colonial architecture, and was a big house for the time as well. It had been a doctor's residence for many generations. So you can imagine just that, not even the connection to, war might be something. But so, I lived there from birth until we moved before sixth grade, and things would just happen. I wasn't, everyone in my family except my dad would acknowledge it, like he didn't think he had an explanation for everything. So the normal things are just like cold spots, hearing people walking around, the doors would jangle, like open or try to open. It had those iron, not doorknobs, like levers you had to pick up with your finger,
Yeah.
And so they like a barn does now, I guess. Barns don't have doorknobs. They have those things still. And, you were just never alone. I was never alone. And I was terrified of my bedroom. I remember that. I would sleep with, like a 60-watt bulb on all night. And I would dive to my bed. Like I would take a couple steps into the room and dive over the rest of the room to my bed because I just didn't want to be grabbed by whatever was underneath the bed. And I don't believe that's probably real, but it felt real at the time.
Yeah.
And My closet door, I would never close my closet door. I can't tell you why. So I would walk into a room in that house and feel something, sad or angry or, one of the confusing things, of course, like, and, if there was someone in the room, I'd be like, what happened? Is somebody fighting something? And normally it was like nothing happened. So they could have been lying to me. They would do that. Parents don't tell you when they're having arguments. Or, something else was in the room feeling angry, but I didn't, that was never an explanation or an option. So I thought maybe I was angry. So you get confused about your own feelings because you don't know. There's no validation. There was validation about some of the strange things happening, but not the personal things. And I remember one night we were in our dining area and I was working on this fourth grade project that went all year long on Pennsylvania. And it was the first experience of doing one of those long-term projects. And I was up until like 11 o'clock, which is late for a fourth grader,
Yeah.
And above the table, we had a chandelier, which was on a dimmer switch. And we're working on it. My mom's helping me. We're kind of building the thing. Like we had to collect all these things and put them in folders, make it all look really pretty. We had to fill out maps and all kinds of stuff. And the dimmer switch just turned, shoop, like go to bed, just turned, lights off. But we watched it turn. It wasn't like just, no light for you. It was like specifically right there, not the rest of the house. And right above you, watch the dimmer switch turn off.
Wow.
So, okay, it's time to go to bed. I'm like, Mom, like, so there were places that my animals wouldn't go in the house, like the cats wouldn't go downstairs in the basement. And they wouldn't go up in the attic. And so it's funny to me because when I look back, I'm like, well, of course I had a lot of anxiety. Like, these things
Yeah.
are happening and they're things that your family agrees are happening somewhat, but also doesn't or can't validate for whatever reason. And then we moved when I was going into sixth grade and we moved up to this farmhouse. Couldn't be more different, probably. Like I lived in town in the first house and we had close neighbors and there was kind of a busy road close and we still had chickens in town though. Yeah. So, but we moved up to the country and the closest neighbor was, gosh, like a mile away. Like,
Yeah.
there weren't neighbors. We had some that you could see from our house, but they were elderly and we couldn't, like they were quiet. So everything was so quiet. So in that house, I didn't really have many experiences as a young person, like as a teenager. One of the clearest examples of receiving spiritual guidance, though, I believe happened for me there that just changed my life. And that was on a random day, I received an advertisement for a school that, you had to live at. It was a boarding school.
Mm.
And I was the youngest of three kids. And my parents had at that point separated and were getting divorced. And I really did not like my new school district very much. Because we lived out so far, like my school bus ride was like over an hour in the morning. It was terrible. And because we didn't have any friends close. So I had to wait for someone to drive me everywhere all the time, So I asked my mom if I could apply and she said yes. And I really feel like just that brochure showing up at my house just randomly, like I never heard of the place before. I never sought out that kind of a solution. Like what would be a good solution to being so isolated and miserable in school, you know?
Yeah.
It didn't occur to me to, well, move away. So I believe that was like spirit's my first memory of spirit saying, hey, like here's a way you can change this whole mess, right?
Mm.
So I did go to that school, and I know that there were ghosts at this school, but I didn't remember. I don't really remember having like contact with them. I know we heard things and that, but that's actually where I met my husband. But that's going to be another story.
Oh, I can't wait for that one.
Yeah. So probably, as you know, I didn't have many experiences in that home as a young person. I don't remember many experiences through my 20s. There were a couple,
Mm.
not like big things. I think it really started developing in my late 20s. I had gotten my master's degree in counseling, and I was a therapist in the city, mostly in the city of Reading, sometimes outside, you know. And I worked with a lot of situations that were very acute.
Mm.
So domestic violence, but it hadn't been resolved. Like the situation had happened and was unfolding, and we weren't sure, who could live in the house and who couldn't live in the house, and even what kinds of injuries were going to be remaining. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, things that had been sussed out by schools, that kind of
Mm.
thing. So they were court involved families, almost all of them, and families and kids at risk. And I was in their homes. So it wasn't like they would come to the office and it would be very, I don't know what to, sterile. I
Yeah.
was sitting at their table, and many times, of course, they want to put out their best face or whatever, but they couldn't maintain their whole environment. And I was seeing what was happening. And so what I found living and working so close to my clients and spending so much time with them is that I would suddenly just have a knowing or a sense. And frequently, so for example, like a case of domestic violence where the judge says the perpetrator can't be at the residence. And I would have to go from one client to another through the city. Sometimes I would have someone with me, like a teenager who we were taking, to go look for jobs or something like that. And I would just drive by that house and I would see the people there. And I'm like, yeah, they're breaking the court order. That can't happen. But it was purely my intuition or purely guidance that was saying, like, swing by that address, see what's happening.
Mm.
So um, I was like, well, that's great because now I can help move the case forward. I can help resolve things for the kids. Things aren't up in the air if I know one thing or the other, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, it would be hard for the families. It's hard for the kids to say, of course, they wanted to see their parent or they wanted everybody to be happy. And sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. So we could make it safe. So I started reading just everything I could, that was like late 90s, early 2000, very early 2000. I was just reading everything I could, and most of it was published by Hay House. And I liked Doreen Virtue a lot. So I started reading her things, and, she would say, just ask. So I
Yeah.
started asking. And I'd have a case that I was like, okay, what's going on here? Like, I can't figure it out, and suddenly I would get some guidance, you know? Um, and that led me to actually attending several of her workshops in California because it was just so helpful. So I was so able to help. And at the time, she was doing training that she called angel therapy. So it fit exactly with what I did, although I did it a little bit more ghetto style, you know. but it really did fit. And like one example I have of that um, was I had this family that was just, it was such an interesting story because the it was a young boy who was on the spectrum before the spectrum was understood at all, right? And I'd say he was like 9 or 10, and he came from another city to live with his father because his mother had passed away. And he didn't know his father at all because his mother had never told the father that she was pregnant and had his son.
Oh,
So
wow.
the father was like no experience being a father. He had always been single. He was functional. He did maintenance work and worked for himself a lot, but he also drank a lot. And by that time, he was older. He was in his maybe late 40s. He was much older than I was at the time. And no one wanted to say this isn't going to work. And what are we going to do with this kid that needs a resource, who lost his
Mm,
mom and who has some special needs? And he deserves a chance with his dad, and the dad deserved a chance, right? So, of course, we said, Dad, you have to stop drinking. Well, anybody who has any habit, you know, um, that's not so easy to do, especially when you're stressed out.
yeah.
So one day, so the courts were doing all kinds of things to try and maintain and keep an eye on this family. And one thing was, I believe I had to go there like every other day, like several times a week. And I remember being a little bit frustrated because how do you get through this wall, and help them? And the neighborhood they lived in was very sad, kind of, and heavy and that kind of thing. And of course, they were defensive because, here I am. I'm the face of the people telling them, you got to change.
Mm,
And I remember knocking on the door and thinking those kinds of things like, gosh, like I could really just go get another job. you know,
yeah.
like this is kind of overwhelming to me. And I liked the people. And so I knocked on the door and suddenly I was overcome with the smell of alcohol, you know. And I'm looking around. I'm like, there was no alcohol. It wasn't like it was spilled on the doorway. There was no alcohol. And, I got the chills, like the angel chills. I'm getting them now, just telling the story. And it gave me enough confidence to just confront him and say, look, I know you're drinking. And it was purely spiritual, like purely, I had no evidence, but it helped to break through the denial for him
Mm,
and make it okay to say, I'm struggling, and what can we do about it? How can we, you know, get help? How can we keep you safe? How can we keep the child safe? And we actually got some places with him and with his child, and things were resolved, and it didn't become a real hardship for any of them,
yeah. Wow.
But it really took me just kind of going with, okay, well, I'm smelling some alcohol, and so I know there's none here, and they really were putting on their best everything so that
Mm,
everything looked fine. Um, and I think that was probably the first time that I just totally, completely went with what I was getting spiritually, you know,
yeah.
and how quickly things changed after that,
Yeah. Right.
because that could have gone on for years, you
Yeah.
know,
So it
just,
was a great result.
It really was. And so I continued to develop those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And was that through your clients, or was that just in your everyday life?
that I continued to develop.
Yeah.
Um, some was through clients. I did start doing some readings when I would go to California and have trainings. Um, I started to get involved in core energetics, which is a type of therapy. It's a
Right.
body psychotherapy where the idea is you store emotions in your body, and that creates blocks or leaks based on experience during development. And there's layers, right? So I started my own kind of healing journey, going to a therapist who does that and exploring that connection and learning about the energy. And that's really what it's about. It's about the energy. So that was the personal piece. And I also got very involved in just understanding like the feminine divine and studying that, um, to the degree that I just decided like I'm going to live my life this way. Like I want to understand just knowing what the right thing is to do or an option to do as opposed to running around chasing things. And
Mm.
another thing that happened was in our community, there were there have been wounds to the spiritual community since like the early 1900s in Berks County. Um, there's a practice of folk medicine called powwowing, which
Right.
is faith healing for the Pennsylvania Dutch. And there had been deaths, and they had related it to witchcraft. Excuse me. And so the community in like around 1920 really closed down around those things. Like you didn't talk about it, people didn't pass it on to their children. um, so it's kind of unique because we're surrounded by other counties that are really pretty open about silly things like crystals and tarot
Mm.
cards, and our community is kind of closed down with the exception of at the time a handful of people who were considered just the top, um locally. And so there's one man who's like writes and researches a lot of ghost stories, and he's one of those. And there was a man named Bob Moyer who was teaching tarot classes at the community college. So I took those classes, and just as a way of keeping me connected because I couldn't find other like-minded people nearby.
Yeah.
And it turned out that he had just started a business at the Renaissance Fair. So I learned to read tarot, and he invited me to read at the Renaissance Fair. And um, I'm now an owner of that business with a partner.
Oh,
Um,
wow. I didn't know that.
20 years later, more than 20 years later. Yeah, Bob has
Wow.
passed
Yeah.
away, and we actually own it. And so I've read at the fair for more than 20 years. That was never my idea or intention. It was just fun.
Mm.
And it was a way to keep connected with and to learn. I learned a lot from reading at the Renaissance Fair because there's just so many people and so many different walks of life and that kind of thing. But really, the intention was for me to continue to practice and meet people who build a community, right?
Mm.
Because there really wasn't one. And I don't even feel like there still is that much of one in my county, right? Um, so there was another thought I had. Oh, at that time, I also learned Reiki, which is about energy. And that
Yeah.
was like the early 2000s, and that was big stuff then. Um,
Yeah. It went through a phase, didn't it?
it did. And there were just tons of, I don't know, big people, things on TV, I don't know, interviews with people. And uh, Sylvia Brown was big then, you know. So I guess that was where it was going. And then I got kind of tired. And I got kind of tired of being a therapist. I had an agency with another man. We had started the agency, and things kind of went sideways um, in the ownership of that, in the things that we were being asked to do. It was just exhausting at the point.
Mm.
So I lost that job, and for about 6 months, I did readings at the Renaissance Fair, especially, and I just kind of learned about the things that were happening to me.
Yeah.
Um, and that helped me to I started to learn about manifestation, which is a lot like getting guidance.
Yeah.
Um, and I manifested my first husband, met him, and then my daughter.
Mm.
So that was just a whole new level of being intuitive and developing, because now I had this little person who could apparently hear my thoughts. I could hear her voice inside my head. I didn't know this was not normal. I didn't, because people talk about mother's intuition, and I heard her voice in my head, I think when she was in my belly, but she would answer my thoughts sometimes, and I realized that really wasn't probably good for her.
That's incredible.
Yes. Well, I think that's now she's 17. So I think that's why she has anxiety, because she can hear people's thoughts.
Wow.
Yeah. So where do we go from there? So, okay, COVID comes by. Yeah. So remember that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had during the time before I had my daughter, and I would channel into journals, just channel stuff. And many of the things that happened during COVID and before COVID were in my journals. And that was easily 10, 12, 13 years before it happened.
Yeah. Wow.
It was more than that. It was more than that. And then I started seeing other things that I remember channeling about just happening in the world. I'm like, huh, look at that. It's happening. I had always intended to develop mediumship because I enjoyed it, and I would allow it. I mean, it would just happen occasionally um, when I was doing readings, and I would just go with it. I did get some training in mediumship, but that was not available to me. Mediumship training was not a thing at the time.
Mm.
And then, so COVID happened, and I had this experience with my daughter where just like it felt like a portal opened in the room, and a voice came in and jumped right into me and came out of my mouth, this voice, and gave her a message. And I was like, well, I guess I should probably get on that mediumship thing, because that doesn't feel safe, right? I'm not sure that I want to be the next, movie of the week. I don't know.
Yeah.
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 You know, so I did, and everything then was over Zoom. So, which made the world smaller, but it gave me access to things I wouldn't have had. So
Yeah.
I got training. I joined the James Van Prague level 2 training, and they kind of pointed me in the direction of Tony Stockwell. Um, and for the trance training. So I was led to trance because of that kind of unusual experience.
Mm.
Um, so now I really love doing trance, and I really love doing healing that way. And
Yeah.
through all of that, well, I had kind of, I guess what you would say, a negative spiritual experience, where I was encountering things that were not necessarily light and love and beauty. And um, I found out, I learned about attachments,
Mm.
which is something I had taught didn't exist, in most of the things that are published. It talks about your vibration being too low is what causes those things, or and I didn't feel like my vibration was too low, but I absolutely had some dark or negative experiences, and I did go through, of course, emotional trauma myself,
Mm.
um, that that had to be resolved spiritually, but it was this negative attachment that um, also prompted me to get back to mediumship. And
Yeah.
I learned about gatekeepers and spirit guides, because I didn't really know about those when I did take mediumship, which was, a long time ago, 20 some years ago, with Doreen Virtue. She didn't talk anything about really our guides. Now, she was always talking about angels and guides, but um, we actually would go into a light trance to do mediumship. So that was a different way than it's been taught to me recently.
Mm.
Um, and I understood that we had these guides and we had gatekeepers. And so I had a meeting with my gatekeepers and my guides, and I said, listen, this isn't how I want this to be. Like, I want things to be joyful and light and fun and healthy. you know I
Yeah.
don't want the scary stuff. I don't want to deal, not that I'm afraid of it, but I was afraid at the time. I was definitely afraid. And so I literally had like a staff meeting. I said, listen, guys, I don't trust right now, because I was kind of left hanging. I was
Yeah.
blindsided. I was blindsided by this, dark nonsense. And what are we going to do about that? Because I need to work closely with you. Um, I need to control what's happening. Spirit can't just jump into my body and take over, like, the in the movies.
Mm.
And so I told my guides that for me to build trust, I needed to, one, get information or meet the person who had been referred to in several readings that I had received. So this was supposed to this great love coming into my life, and I'm just like, I don't see him. No, that's not happening. So I told the guides to bring me that person. And then I told the guides to give me more opportunities to share and develop my gifts. So very soon after that conversation with my guides, I got a job ghost hunting. And
Whoa.
that's how I became a ghost hunter. And it's funny because I really never thought about ghost hunting. Like, of all the things that I thought the guides could come up with, that was not the thing. And it was still during COVID. So we were wearing masks. That was just not the thing. I'm like, seriously? Like, and I mean, I was always felt like I was hunted by ghosts, not that it would be the other way around.
Yeah.
So, um, I got hired, and we would go to these locations that were definitely haunted. Some of them were terrifying, and definitely I learned. Like,
Mm.
I absolutely learned. And I learned other things, that like after trauma or during trauma, your spiritual guides may change. I did not know that. So when I was in my trauma, I really didn't recognize that. I did recognize that I wasn't hearing my guides the same way. And I prayed for clarity twice, and twice my glasses disappeared from my life. One time they never came back in the middle of the night. Where'd they go? I don't know. I never found them. And I've had glasses in the second grade, so I kind of need the
Yeah.
glasses for
Yeah.
everything. And I've never lost or broken a pair except for those So don't pray for clarity. Just side note. You will get the opposite. You're not supposed to know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, we would go to these locations and people would buy tickets to learn to ghost hunt and have experiences. And that became sort of my thing. I actually didn't make any money at it. Isn't that interesting? The company was a little bit shady, and went out of business, because somebody was fraudulent. But I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I do understand the whole time I was doing it, I'm like, why am I doing this? This is so weird. Why am I doing this? And it was about me confronting my fears. Right. So the other thing I had wanted was communication, or bringing this person into my life. So that started as well, but that took probably 3 years to happen. But I started to get songs in the middle of the night, and the songs started to unfold to meeting this person and bringing him into my life. Yeah.
Wow.
That's the power of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
life-changing kinds of experiences. So yeah, I guess that's how I became a medium, or
Wow.
owned being a medium. Self-defense.
It's kind of forced on you. You slipped into it forcibly.
Well, and then, my daughter was, she's a medium as well. So when she was 13, yeah, things started happening in the house I live in, just things. And I'm like, wait, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I know better than to do that. Who is, knocking on my door, and that's not accessible by, because there's snow piled in front of it. Somebody's knocking on the door.
Yeah. So it was in your best interest, really, to
Really.
know and understand mediumship for her sake as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Parenting her, definitely. And remembering how myself at that age, it hadn't been validated or understood, or, any of that,
Wow.
you know.
So did this run in your family? Like, do your brothers and your sisters, are they the same as this? Your parents?
Not that they're willing to say. My oldest brother has passed away, and now he does lots of communication from the other side. He was actually he's 8 years older than me, and he was very encouraging of me, which I think was funny, right? He was very sensitive. He had a lot of experiences in the house we grew up in, because of course he lived there really until he was 18. So
Yeah.
he had a lot of experiences there. So he didn't deny it in any way. My other brother, I believe, is more sensitive than I am, but does not want anything to do with it. So when I get EVPs from ghost hunting, I send them to him and force him to listen. He's like, stop it. Why do you tell me these things? Because
proof. It's proof.
Yes. And he's a mechanic, so I taunt him with my haunted cars that do things that they shouldn't do.
Yeah.
It's like start themselves. So my parents, I don't know, my dad is still very skeptical, but not against it or anything. He's just thinks I'm probably just a really good salesperson. And my mom participates with me. She just hasn't done anything herself. She probably could or has. She just hasn't developed it.
Yeah.
Brother thinks my grandfather, who was a blacksmith, was probably like me. That's what my brother will say, that he was
Wow. Yeah.
like me because he was an artist. Um, and I don't know, there are some other things, but the powwowing that I talked about in the beginning does run in our family. But my grandmother was the generation that they kind of closed the doors on that, you
Mm,
know. So my mother wasn't trained. So then I wasn't trained, you know.
right. And you said that was faith healing.
Yeah, it's a type of faith healing. It's called powwowing. But I think the Native Americans actually called it that.
Right.
I'm not quite sure. It's called Bruchardy, which is something about, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Wow.
German.
Yeah. So what about your husband? How does he how does he cope with all this going on?
Oh, good Lord. Um, well, so when I did find him, he was living in Wisconsin and I was here in Pennsylvania, and I did find him online, and we did know each other in the past. So we started talking, like, well, what have you been doing for the last 30 years? I'm like, well, fighting demons and catching ghosts and
Just your everyday stuff.
just your everyday stuff, you know, load of laundry here and there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was just because I had been in relationships, of course, during my development, and I really just felt like you have to be prepared for all the types of crazy because it's a buffet. And so I really just let my crazy flag fly. I told him just from the beginning because I don't want to like get all connected and warm and then be like, oh wait, you have seen that? Ooh, yeah, I
Yeah.
just nope, you need to know from the door that this is gonna get pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And and it did. It has. Well, in fact, I mean his mother was passed and I feel like she had part in bringing us together, you know,
Mm,
so even though she was on the other side, she is on the other side.
yeah.
So he is developing his own mediumship, sort of. He
Oh,
ghost hunts. We
wow.
all ghost. We all ghost hunt together. We all ghost hunt
Oh, that's fantastic.
together. We all ghost hunt together. Um, he sometimes indulges me when I want to do trance speaking and I haven't spoken for a couple times. Like I have some opportunities during the week to practice and we don't always get to do it or whatever. So I try
Mm,
to at least like once every 2 weeks. I really love to do it at least once a week, but it's hard to speak there's no one to listen to. Right.
yeah.
So he does indulge me and listen. Um, so there's a really funny story about when he came to visit and he knew I was a medium, right? The first time he came to visit was he came for New Year's and he stayed for about a week. And I was working during that time. So he was home alone. And we had been in my room and he had heard a rooster crow. And I didn't respond, you know? And so he's like, huh, well, that's weird. Like we're in town, you know?
Mm.
So he thought it was a ghost rooster. So So when I was at work, he and the cat went through the house hunting this ghost rooster because they were going to catch the ghost rooster. And and he told me about this. Well, no, he didn't tell me. He didn't tell me about it. He went home. He didn't tell me about it. And then a couple weeks later, I was waiting to go into work. He works third shift, and I worked well whenever I wanted to work, but it was morning, and he had gotten off of work, and so we would talk on the phone until I could go into work. And I told him that my neighbor's roosters woke me up. He's like, "Oh my god." I thought he said, I thought I heard roosters when I was at your house, but I thought they were ghosts. And he told me how he hunted these ghost roosters with the cat. And the
Yeah.
cat just went along with him. The cat just followed him around the
It
house.
was probably entertainment for the cat. He's probably never had so much
Yes.
fun in his life.
Yes. Right. So that is a great. I never laughed so hard. I never laughed so hard. So the next time we went to visit him, my daughter and I, bought every rooster ringtone we could find. And I slip him roosters here and there when I find them,
Yeah.
like really bad old art, like homemade art. Like
Yeah.
I find all the roosters and just, put it in his lunchbox or in his drawer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's funny.
he's a good spirit about and actually he just had an occasion. Oh my God. I totally can't believe I didn't say that. So he's been reading tarot card though, at the Ren Fair with me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Developing that way. So currently we only have one car. And that car went into the garage and we borrowed a 1998 Jeep Wrangler from my brother. Now it's stick shift, so I can't drive it, right?
Mm,
It's like driving its full box on wheels. I
yeah.
mean, it's so loud you think you're inside a jet engine. And because my brother's a mechanic, it's still being worked on. So there's like no dash. There's no dashboard. There's just the metal. There's like it's like going back in a time machine, Oh my God. I can't even believe
The
I'm
bare necessities.
telling the entire world this, right? My daughter's in the back seat. You can hardly hear her, which is awesome. She's talking. And I'm like, I can't hear you. Like, does this thing have a radio? We're like, yeah, but it's not hooked up. You can sing. Like, this is what it was like in the 90s, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You didn't want to hear the person next to you. It's crazy. So, and then she wants to go like, can we get a drink or something? Yeah, but I have to unzip the window. So he went to the grocery store for us and he came out. Oh, and his phone broke. So he didn't have a phone. So he came out and he couldn't get the key to turn. He couldn't start the car. He couldn't start the car. So he went in and he used the store's landline to call me and tell me this. Now, it's not really far to the store, but it's not also like carry your groceries home close either,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you still are going to leave this 1998 piece of metal in their parking lot. So we still had to, resolve this. And so I said, well, I could send you an Uber or something. I'm not really sure how. I don't know. And he said, okay, well, I'll call you back. Let me go out. And he admits, I'm outing him now on international space, right? He admits he went out there and he went to move the groceries so that if he had to, the other thing is that there's no locks on the doors because they're plastic. So, he said he went to move the groceries. So if he had to leave them there, they'd be less like, somebody could steal them.
Yeah.
So, and he said, as he's doing that, he says, okay, guys, like, if you want me to believe, I really want to believe, but if you want me to believe, I need help. I need to get the car home, and he got in the seat and he put the key in and it went and it turned and he got home. And so when he got home, he was kind of like, the look people have when they're like, he looks scared,
Yeah.
amazed, and excited all at the same time,
Yeah, yeah.
And my daughter said, what's wrong? And he goes, I think I just had an encounter with the supernatural. Through the car, because it started and we got home. He got home with groceries, which was amazing.
Oh.
And I'm grateful.
Yeah.
And so that's like every day in this house.
Yeah.
Like we just my my daughter will, I'll be up here and doing my thing, and just common conversation is like, so Mom, how's your day? I'm like, oh, well, it's okay. I did this, I did that. And she's like, so I heard someone else's voice coming out of your mouth when I walked up, I'm like, yeah, like it's normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that happens.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's just so cool that your husband is totally on board with you. Like you're all in this together.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love it. Absolutely love it.
It really is an adventure. The levels of crazy experiences are just so funny. The ghost hunting is hysterical. My daughter played Duck, Duck, Goose with ghosts. She played hide and seek with ghosts. The ghost stole her pants. We never got them back.
As they do.
I know. They do.
Yeah. That is awesome. And it's just she's so fortunate that she has a mum like you that can guide her, that you understand what's happening, you're there for her. You know what I mean? Just you've got all this knowledge and wisdom through your own experiences and development. That's awesome. That is so awesome. Wow.
I try. I don't know. I feel like every time I learn something, I come up with more questions than I started with.
Yeah. But that's what keeps the hunger going, doesn't it? For more.
It is, because I'm like, okay. And I said this to another medium. I said, people will sit down for a reading and be like, I'm skeptical. I'm like, okay, well, so am I. Like every day I can have the most amazing, miraculous thing happen. And I ride that wave, for a little while. And then the next day I'm like, okay, show me, like, and just the hunger and just what's the next thing? What kind of amazing, it's an amazing world we live in. And we are, we are just not even like, we're unlimited, completely unlimited. Our spirits are unlimited. Life can be what you think it is.
Yeah. Magical.
Magical. It is magical.
Yeah. Wow.
And such an adventure, such a blessing. So, but I did not really intend to develop these gifts this way. And it was self-defense. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah. That's how you're pleading.
It was my own survival.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Julie, for being on the show. It has been so much fun, so many laughs. You've had such an incredible journey. And the fantastic part of it is that your family are 100% beside you on this journey. Yes. Living the magic with you. That is, I love to hear those stories. I love to hear that, that unity. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where can people find you?
My website is mediumatlarge.com, but between the medium and the at and the large, there's a dash.
Okay.
So we'll have to put it up in the...
I'll put that up in the show notes so people can click the link and go and find you. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. I am excited to have you back again very, very, very soon and to hear some more wonderful stories. We might have to throw a ghost hunting story in there somewhere. And they're my favorites. And we'll look forward to having you back soon. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thanks for joining me at the Medium's Table. The universe is always speaking. Listen and let your spirit soar. Curious for more? Click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe.